Ford Australia has just released quote-unquote full specifications, and it must be said, a great deal of granular detail regarding accessories and factory/dealer customization options for the Ranger Super Duty, which is not on sale yet, but will be coming early next year. And I know because I'm getting a bunch of emails from punters right about now saying words to the effect of, I've just put down a deposit and I'm lying awake in bed at night, looking at the ceiling, fantasizing about my Super Duty. Am I doing the right thing? I'd suggest that A, this has been quite a well-orchestrated prick tease over several months now, designed to get deposits onto contracts in dealerships. And B, the Ranger Super Duty, which I so want to like, is mostly a good news story, but also a bit of a bad news story. So in this video, we're going to do the good news versus the bad news. I've been doing this rather a long time now, like well over 10 years, getting new cars cheap for ordinary Australians. And that means I know that every time someone emails me and says, hey, dude, I've just put a deposit down on blah and I'm waiting for it, what do you think? kind of thing. They're not really looking for an objective assessment, right? They're looking for validation. They're looking for 2 thumbs up. You're doing exactly the right thing, dude. Smart move, good call, kind of thing. And yet I always think that honesty is better than appeasement when it comes to things of this nature. It's not always the case. When your soon-to-be ex-wife number 5 or something says, honey, does this dress make my ass look chunky? Appeasement is definitely the way to go. Like, if you know what's good for you. But in the case of people spending mega bucks for the vehicle, quote unquote, of their dreams to tow their acoustically transparent aluminium chitois on the big lap of Australia, all 4.5 tons of it. Imagine that. I've had fun. This is the opposite of that. But anyway, if you are fantasizing about that, you generally need an honest appraisal, but you're probably fishing for appeasement. So this is going to be either uplifting or very disappointing for you if you're thinking about the Super Duty. We'll get into the details in just a sec. This report is sponsored by NordVPN. Get a mega discount plus 4 extra months for free right now with my exclusive deal. Go to nordvpn.com/AEJC now. Online security threats are everywhere, but you don't have to be the next victim. That's where NordVPN comes in, locking everything down securely in the background. Go to nordvpn.com/AEJC now. Every 2-year plan receives that huge discount plus 4 extra months of Nord for free. nordvpn.com/AEJC. Using NordVPN is easy. Just subscribe, download the app and connect. 1 click later, your IP address is shielded and your traffic is encrypted across as many as 6 of your devices. Nord is the fastest VPN on the planet. It costs only about as much as a single cup of coffee every month to keep your data, your identity and your devices secure. Masking your location means you'll be able to access content and resources that might be blocked where you live. Plus, you can continue to watch your favourite content when you travel. Boost your online security at nordvpn.com/AEJC. Get that mega discount and enjoy those 4 extra months for free. It's all totally risk-free with Nord's rock-solid 30-day money-back guarantee. It's easy to stay safe online. Go to nordvpn.com/AEJC now. So up front, what I've done here is I've got Ford's announcement and I've downloaded as much of it as I can as a PDF and I've uploaded it into my Google Drive, and you can download their information and digest that to your heart's content using links in the description. Okay, so just whip down there if you want Ford's unvarnished perspective on the latest announcements about the Super Duty without the filtration that might take place with other media outlets producing a quote-unquote story for you about it. So if you want it without the editorialization and you just want Ford's version, links in the description. Now, I would say that the Ranger Super Duty is quite a cheap way. It's objectively an expensive ute, right? But it's also, when you look at it on the plus side, it's quite a cheap way to get probably the best engineered GCM tow capacity and GVM upgrade for any ute currently on sale in Australia. Like, objectively, it's a $30,000 upgrade, but I'd suggest that if you want that much capacity upgrade, this is not only good value, but you can't do that anywhere else. The interesting thing to me about most GVM upgrades, which are very popular for the heavy tow fraternity, is that what it boils down to is a bit of paperwork and replacement springs and dampers, right? And I'd suggest that the weakest link with a GVM upgrade and heavy towing and extreme usage of utes is the chassis. And most GVM upgrades don't do anything for chassis. So what you're doing essentially is making the chassis more vulnerable to damage from extreme usage cases. Whereas with this Ranger Super Duty, a lot of that has been taken care of, because certainly the mass increase of roughly 500 kilograms over a standard Ranger, a lot of that would be to augment the chassis so that it can cope with the intended usage, right? So on the plus side, this is really a positive if you've got the readies. I know this is expensive because we're talking about an XLT, we're talking about mid-60s kind of thing to 90 grand. So it's roughly a $30,000 increase, certainly more than 30 by the time you spec it up with a tray and whatever else, a bull bar, you know. So XLT cab chassis, normal Ranger, dual cab 3 litre V6. If we look at that, it's $67,000-ish, right? That's before you put a tray on it or anything else and before you get it on the road. And I would suggest that good luck getting a Ranger Super Duty equivalent for less than 100 grand by the time you put a tray on it and a bull bar, and you know, by the time you get it the way you want to get it, it's going to be $100,000. So we're talking a $30,000 bump to get that capability. So you have to ask yourself, do you really need that? Or you don't always have to need it. You know, you might just want it. If you can afford it and you want it, okay. I'm all about the what do you need generally when it comes to this, because I can't get inside your head and think about what you want. But if you need that, okay, this is not a bad way to do it, okay? The clearance is interesting. It's going to go from 234 millimetres to 299-ish on the Super Duty, right? So that's a 61 to 65 sort of millimetre upgrade, 2.5 inches in America kind of thing. The tow capacity is going to go from 3.5 tonnes to 4.5 tonnes. That's a 1,000 kilo increase in tow capacity. Like, good luck getting that anywhere else. The GVM is going to go from 3,280 to 4,500, which is 1,220 kilos increase in GVM, which is a substantial bump. And again, this is in comparison to a standard XLT cab chassis, dual cab, 3 litre V6 Ranger, okay? The GCM, like the combination mass, is going to go from 6,400 to 8,000 kilos, which is 1,600 increase, which is huge, right? And the curb weight is going to go from 2,130 to 2,675, which is 545 kilos extra. And I don't know exactly where you would apportion that 545 extra kilos, but it'd have to be chassis augmentation. There'd be springs and dampers in there, heavier duty mounts for this and that, wheels and tyres, upgrades to protection against water and mud ingress, possibly cooling system upgrades and transmission coolers and things of that nature. Details like that have not yet been released. But 545 kilos of additional mass is a thing, okay? And that's part of the whole good news, bad news scenario to come. So just bear that in mind. But on fundamentals, you're getting a lot of additional kit, as well as, I think, a front diff lock that is only available or only It may only be activated in low range, if I read that correctly. I'm doing that off the top of my head. Please accept my apology if I'm wrong about that. The first piece of advice I'd give you about this is to wait if you possibly can. I know that a Ranger Super Duty is shaping up to be one of those status symbol purchases, and you do want to be one of those first kids, one of the first cool kids to get the cool bit of kit, but there's a good reason for being a little mature about this if you can and just waiting, because Ford reveals full specs official accessories for new Ranger Super Duty, bringing enhanced capability and durability. It just makes you want to rush out and get one. I get that, dude. Part of me feels that way, and I wouldn't own a Ford if my life depended on it, because just write it down backwards. DROF, driver returns on foot. It's a hidden message, dude. Enhanced durability, right? That's part of that headline. There's no evidence for that, quite the opposite. You know, durability meaning reliability in service. If that's your definition of durability, there's no evidence for that, because we haven't got it in service and we're not getting anecdotal feedback from owners yet. So you are being a lab rat if you're an early adopter, right? Ford is definitely going to be beta testing the initial purchases of the Ranger Super Duty. It could be great, it could be shit, there could be a major problem, there could be nothing wrong with it. When they released the first Ranger, it was shaken all over town, and they wouldn't even admit to the nature of the problem beyond, yes, the car is vibrating and we'll have to change your tail shaft, right? So you don't want to be part of that lab rat fraternity, or maybe you do. Maybe it'll be a story you can tell around the campfire, I guess. I'd further suggest that Ford is not the best at reliability and support. So if you're an early adopter, this is the test tube you're in. You're part of this mad experiment, and if something goes wrong, then you will have to roll with it. Whereas if you wait 6 to 12 months, anything could happen to the price, I suppose, but certainly these early teething problems will be resolved, one would hope, in that sort of time frame. And you have to ask yourself, do you really need one, or do you just want it? You know, are you fantasizing about it like that stripper in the nightclub? Do I need her or do I want her, kind of thing? Is it that, or do you actually need that for some assignment that no other ute will do? I guess you also have to weigh up, if a standard Ranger won't do it, what's the cost of pimping it at the likes of ARB or, you know, some other 4x4 aftermarket shot, just turning up one day and say, get started, I want the full pimp, versus buying the Super Duty. There's no question that the integration option, the factory integration option, is better in many ways, but you might get away with the ute you need for half the price if you buy the standard one and take it to the aftermarket industry. So there's that. Now, let's talk about the GVM and the tow capacity, because they're both 4.5 tons. You'll read that in the specs, but you don't get both at the same time. Like you can't load. Picked a good week to stop sniffing glue, didn't I? You can't have both at the same time. You can't load up to 4.5 tons GVM and then tow a 4.5 ton trailer. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have to take 1,000 off, because the gross combination mass is 8 tons, not 9. That's the practical upshot of what I'm saying. So if you've got a 4.5 ton van or other trailer with a big excavator or horse float, whatever it is, then effectively the GVM turns into 3.5 tons so that you don't blow the gross combination mass. Or a better way of putting that is, you can only exploit 3.5 tons of the 4.5 ton GVM limit in that situation without blowing the GCM limit. I hope that makes sense. If not, let me know in the comments. If we need a refresher video on what all these acronyms mean in relation to towing, I'll do one of those for you. But if you're in the market for a Super Duty, you should know what all this shit means, I'd suggest. So pragmatically, I'd suggest that a Ranger Super Duty is probably roughly as good at towing 4.5 tons as a standard Ranger is at towing at its limit, which is 3.5 tons, meaning technically you can do it, but doing so is a bit shit. It's a bit shit on the grounds of safety, and it's a bit shit on the grounds of practicality. We'll have to see in service how it actually performs like that, but you can tow 3.5 tonnes with a standard Ranger. It's pretty hard to do that because by the time you've put a whole lot of Rosie in the passenger seat and a cut lunch for you both, you're overloaded kind of thing. So I'd suggest that a Ranger Super Duty is probably a shit-hot way to get practical, achievable, real-world tow capacity of 3.5 tonnes. And if you looked at it like that, you wouldn't be being an epic dickhead, at least not in my book. It'd be even better if you limited yourself to 3 tonnes worth of van or horse float, excavator, whatever, because I'd suggest then you would drive away with a package that would just shit it in. Okay, and I'm trying not to poo-poo the big capacity here, but car makers are in an arms race when it comes to tow capacity, and they grossly overstate what is reasonably safe in all conditions and reasonably practical to achieve in all conditions. And if you did limit yourself to 3 tonnes, dude, I'd suggest you would have a shit-hot package. So there's that. Here's something that's going to get the Ford fanboys completely offside, and hey, I'll live with that. I still sleep just fine tonight, dude. I'd suggest that they're going to have to pull a real miracle out of their arses, hats and arses from both ends at once. Here's the 2 miracles, because on fundamentals, the on-road dynamics are shaping up to be a bit awful because A, it's got AT tyres as opposed to highway terrain kind of tyres, and I get that, but they're worse on-road. They just are, right, than highway terrains. And I get the orientation, like the focus of this vehicle is the hardcore shit, and that's fine. But if you boost the capability towards, if you stretch the capability over here towards off-road and hardcore, this and that, you're going to lose it on road. And on fundamentals, this thing is 500 kilos heavier when you don't put anything in it, 545, right? And it's sitting 65 millimetres higher. So you've got more mass sitting higher. That's a recipe for worse on-road performance. It just is, okay? So you have to suck that up like a big boy. And I'm sure they do the best they can in R&D at the proving ground, whatever, to ameliorate that. But it has to be worse on fundamentals on-road. It can't not be. Incidentally, in relation to that 65 millimetres, they're going from 31-inch tyres on a standard Ranger to 33-inch tyres on the Super Duty, okay? So that means 2 inches in diameter equals 1 inch in the radius. So you're getting an extra inch out of the radius, and then you're probably getting, about 40 millimetres of ground clearance from suspension. That's kind of where they're getting those increases in clearance from, I'd suggest. And I'd further suggest that lifting a car up doesn't give you more suspension travel. So if you're one of these beard strokers talking about giving it a lift to get better wheel travel or something, that's not how this works. The wheel travel is kind of limited by the suspension geometry, the length of the arms, the capacity for droop, and the extension of the shock absorbers, and all kinds of things that can limit suspension travel like that, the location of the bump stops. But realistically, when you lift a car, generally what you do is you give it more capacity for bump, but you reduce its capacity in droop because the body's sitting higher, kind of thing. So suspension travel, pretty much similar to a normal Ranger, I'd suspect. It's pretty similar, but more clearance. And clearance is often the limiting factor off-road. Let's not forget that. My biggest criticism of the Ranger Super Duty, though, would have to be the engine. Okay, it's got the 3-litre V6 diesel that comes with the standard Ranger, but it's in, to be kind, a different state of tune. Okay, the mid-range power is the same. The peak torque is 600 Newton meters, so it would be easy to say, well, that's the same in the mid-range. But pro tip, this vehicle is going to be a lot heavier than a standard Ranger because empty without a tray, it's 545 kilos heavier, okay? And then when you put their tray on it, which we'll get to, that's going to be heavier than the tray you'd probably put on a standard Ranger. They've got this purpose-built Super Duty steel tray. So if you've got a Ranger with an alloy tray, the difference, a standard one, versus the Super Duty with their tray, this is before you pimp it anymore, it's probably 600 kilos heavier. So we've got the same mid-range power in a vehicle 600 kilos heavier, and it gets worse from there. That 3-litre V6 has been detuned at the top end of its performance from 184 kilowatts, which you get in your Wild Track or XLT, whatever. It's come down to 154 kilowatts, which is a 16% downgrade in peak performance, okay, peak power. And that can't be because they decided that that was the way they wanted to go at R&D. This has got to, like, you want to make a vehicle heavier and you want to give it these substantial additional capacities, the extra GCM and the extra tow capacity and the extra payload capacity and the extra ability to put all pimped accessories on it and carry all this extra mass. What do you want in R&D if you're an engineer, right? What's the fundamental thing you want to underpin that with is you want more power. You don't want it to be the same or less. You want it to be more. Right? You definitely do. They didn't have any other engine options, and there must be something about stretching these capabilities that makes the engine in its state of tune inside a Wild Track or an XLT like a standard Ranger untenable. It can't produce 184 kilowatts when you ask it to do these extra things. So they've downgraded it. And they'll give that to you in these nebulous terms about we've tuned it specifically for the Super Duty and we've maintained the peak torque production and all of this stuff. But there has to be a reason. And that might be transmission cooling capacity. It might just be as simple as we didn't have room for a bigger radiator, or it might be that producing 184 kilowatts while you're slogging uphill with a 4.5 ton caravan and a shit ton of stuff in the back might just be something that engine is not capable of doing. It might only be capable of 154 kilowatts in that slogging it out really extreme sort of condition. And Ford will never, no car maker would ever tell you why they're doing this downgrade. What's the granular excuse for this reduction? Because that would lead to a whole bunch of criticism in relation to, well, why didn't you just unfuck that kind of thing? But anyway, that's what they've done, and there's no way to sex this up. So 16% down on peak power. It's heavier. It's 26% up before you add anything from the accessories catalogue, including a tray. And I'm basing that on a bare XLT dual cab chassis as the baseline of comparison, right? So when you think about the power to weight at the GVM limit, we're going from 54.9 kilowatts per tonne with a standard XLT down to 34.2 with a Super Duty. This is a reduction in power to weight of 38%. This is peak power, okay? So you pull out, the engine ramps up to its revs for peak power, and you try and get around that truck, uphill, whatever. Foot mash to the boards, right? That engine is doing all it can do, the little engine that could kind of thing. It's 38% worse than a standard Ranger in that situation. And when you think about it just in terms of its curb weight, it's 84.5 kilowatts per tonne for the standard one, coming down to 57.6 at its curb weight, which is down 32%. So on road doing things of this nature, it's going to be disappointing compared with a standard Ranger. And that's why you have to ask yourself, do you really need the Super Duty? Because it's not like it comes without compromise, is something I would argue. The power to weight is a direct barometer of peak performance, right? So extreme overtaking, need to get around as quickly as possible. Made a bad call, corners coming up much quicker, didn't see that oncoming car, something of that nature. A situation you don't want to be in. More power is an asset in that situation. Not so useful off-road, I'd suggest. You hardly ever use peak power off-road. There has to be a reason for this downgrade. We're never going to find out what it is, but you're going to have to suck it up if you buy one. Plus, the engine now comes with AdBlue because it's Euro 6 compliant. I'm not sure mining and forestry customers are going to love that, as well as beard-stroking outback adventurers such as your good self, dude, if you're still watching. This is AdBlue in remote locations is another great mechanism to get stranded, right? Another system to fail, or I didn't pack the spare AdBlue and now the engine won't start. Not a fun conversation to have, and you're in a dialogue at well 33 on the Canning fucking stock route. Although there is water at well 33, so, you know, if you've got a sat phone, you'd probably just have to wait a couple of weeks and you'll be right. Now, there are some things I like about the Super Duty. I don't want to just shit can it because it is a kind of exciting new vehicle and part of me wants one. If I could get over the hurdle of how Ford was going to look after me potentially if something was wrong with it, a Super Duty would be like, yeah, dude. Now, I've got no doubt that the towing and off-road performance of this vehicle is going to be better, like eclipse every other Ranger and, let's face it, every other competing ute. It's going to be the best at that. There's going to be endless bragging rights at the campfire, the caravan park, whatever. Like, you won't be able to open the bonnet out there in the great Australian fuck all, dude. You won't be able to open the bonnet of a Super Duty without just attracting a plague of bogans, right? You might not have to buy yourself a beer, but you'll be surrounded, immersed, submerged in a plague of bogans. Yeah, oh, mate, new Super Duty. You got the new Super Duty, mate. Kind of. It'll be that all day long. Whenever you stop, it'll be a real novelty for the first, I don't know, 30 seconds. Anyway, another exciting feature, which I really would like it if every car maker rolled this out across every dual cab ute, it would be awesome. And every other vehicle targeting any kind of four-wheel drive adventuring, it'd be great if you could manually burn the DPF, wouldn't it? Regenerate the DPF at will. Probably not in the underground car park at the office. # mistake. But they've included this feature in the Super Duty, and that's shit hot. It's really just a button and the software. So what happens is you can decide to manually regenerate the filter, and it'll flash up a warning if the filter gets 70% full. And then you can decide at your earliest convenience to do a burn sort of thing, which is great. And if more manufacturers had done this with more diesels implemented over the past 10 years, there would probably be far fewer complaints about DPFs, I'd argue. Although having that system there does mean that people might have to know more about, you know, what goes on down there. And Ambient Australia is disinclined to do that because ordinary people don't give a shit about cars. There's that. It's probably the most factory customisable four-wheel drive ute in existence when it launches early next year. That's pretty exciting. Like, if you've got endless cash, that's great. And that's related to the next benefit, which is that if you go to the dealership and you're with the Ming Mole going to everything, and you pimp the shit out of your Ranger Super Duty at the dealership, you tick every box, which will take some time. But if you do that, as opposed to going to the aftermarket industry, then there's going to be a hell of a lot less toing and froing if you've got a warranty issue. Because the game of volleyball you find yourself in, if you're the owner of a vehicle that's been pimped aftermarket, is you front with a problem and then they go, oh, dude, you've got a snorkel, you've got an aftermarket air filter, you've got an aftermarket fuel filter on this car. Those lights are blocking the airflow. They'll say anything to get out of a warranty claim, and then you'll be back to the aftermarket industry and they'll say, oh, mate, it's not our lights that's made your turbo blow up. It's their shit turbo. And you'll be like this playing, you know, you'll be a spectator at this game of volleyball where neither side wants to take custody of the ball. With a Super Duty, if you pimp it in-house, you go back to the dealer and you say, dude, this is rooted, fix it. And they kind of have to wear it because it's all their problem because it's all in-house. And yeah, that's not free. You'll pay a premium for that, but you might be loving it ultimately if there's a problem, is what I'm going to say. It's going to have cred and therefore it's going to have particularly strong resale, I'd suggest. So when you're done, when your Super Duty days are done and you put it on Facebook Marketplace, there's going to be a queue of beard-stroking bogans over the horizon willing to pay a premium for this classic, cult classic outback adventuring vehicle, right? So it's a real hedge, I think, against resale value, and that might at least apologise for the upfront cost. So there's that to consider. It's going to be the king of ranges. Range is the most popular vehicle in the country, not just the most popular ute, but the most popular vehicle. I mean, it's been purpose designed to carry that particular kind of tool. So you'll have the king of ranges, and that's the king of vehicles in this country, surely. So this is only going to be offset, I suppose, by Ford's pedigree, if you want to call it that, for reliability and support, which is, you know, better than Stellantis or Mercedes-Benz, but not much. So I want to talk to you now if you're a fleet buyer or if you're a fleet user, like if you're an employee and you're going to use this vehicle in your work capacity, and Ford is hoping to sell a shit ton of these into forestry and mining and probably Telstra, maybe even the military, who knows. There's no word yet on the safety of these vehicles, but fleets typically don't buy 5-star vehicles, so they will want to ensure that it's a 5-star vehicle, which is probably why they're not going to sell it standard with a bull bar. So the bull bar makes it really hard to achieve 5-star levels of safety. So that's why the bull bar is an accessory and not standard, in my view, at least, or it's one of the compelling arguments for organising the range this way. Because what's going to happen is fleets have got this bullshit policy of 5-star. We're not buying anything that's not 5-star. And then in the case of this vehicle, they're going to buy it, tick the box, and then get the presumably genuine bull bar fitted and instantly downgrade it to 3 stars or 0 or whatever it would be if it were tested in that configuration, which they never are. And this is probably mainly on the basis of vulnerable road user protection. Okay, it's going to be much worse for vulnerable road users, but also you can't bolt a big fat chunk of ARB Summit bar, which is the standard one from the Ford dealer. You can't bolt that to the front of a vehicle without making the crash survivability worse for the occupants. You just can't do that. So Isaac Newton says that can't be done, and I'm on his team. I'm on team Newtonian physics, so there's that. So it's time for fleets, I think, to rethink their whole fleet buying methodology. Because clearly you're not using it, this one, like a 5-star, and having this 5-star prerequisite is pretty much bullshit for vehicles of this nature because they're immediately, effectively downgraded to less than that. And I think you'd agree when you look at that in terms of its fundamentals. That's totally sane and normal, dude. Come on. And the list price, we have to talk about that because it's just the tip of the customer extortion iceberg. When you look at the data that they've just released, and you can download it from the link in the description, the list of shit you can add to your Ranger is limited only by your bank balance, dude. Ford says, quote, "We understand that our Ranger Super Duty customers demand the utmost in performance and reliability from their vehicles, and that extends to their accessories." This is from Brad Hogg, who is boss hog of marketing and sales, Ford Customer Service Division. He's got a horizontal business card, clearly. He goes on, boss hog, and he says, quote, "Our new line of Super Duty Ford licensed accessories offers a one-stop solution for customers, providing fully integrated Ford-engineered products like an ARB bull bar, for example, to prepare Ranger Super Duty for almost anything. From the robust steel tray to advanced device integration, every accessory is built to meet the rigorous demands of Ranger Super Duty work and adventure." Yes, boss hog, like those Ford-engineered products, those legendary Ford-engineered products, including the ARB bull bar, the ARB rock sliding side steps, the worn winch and the forward engineered CB radio. I can imagine exactly how much engineering input Ford has had in all of those. Dude. Ford goes on and embellishes the crap out of all of this stuff. I'm not going to inflict that on you. I've just decided that you don't deserve to have to sit through that to get to the meat and potatoes here. But suffice to say that what they've said about their accessories just makes me want to sit down across from the nearest Ming mole and whilst he gyrates suggestively and I slip $1,000 every few moments into her undergarments. Who wouldn't want to do that? Until she screams at me to stop. Which clearly they never do. So, just to give you some insight into what will happen to you when you are sitting down suggestively across from the Ming mole, you might be asked to purchase the farm pack, which will only set you back $12,000 to $15,000 extra. It is, Ford says, a tray, brackets galvanised body colour or matte black, a water tank, toolbox and ARB summit bar and all-weather floor mats. Imagine that, all-weather floor mats for all the different kinds of weather that the floor of a Ranger Super Duty might conceivably be subjected to. Much more harsh than the weather a wild track might have to wear, for example. Now, you might be asked to purchase the work pack. That's only going to be $8,000 to $10,000, which is nearly nothing when you're buying accessories for a Super Duty. Choice of tray, as above. Integrated device mounting system. All-weather floor mats, once again, because weather at work in a Super Duty can be quite harsh also. Top console mount, weather shields, and wheel nut indicators. Who doesn't want them? They make you look like a full-on bloody Albie Mangles type with his crocodile tooth hat, whatever, don't they? You know, your steel-capped thongs, whatever. You might be imposed upon to procure the adventure pack, which is the premium pack, I must say. $20,000, more or less, depending on the model, which is great value. $7,000. You get your choice of tray, all-weather floor mats, a worn winch, which I guess presupposes the bull bar also, and rock sliders. Ooh, yeah, it's only $20,000 extra, dude. The tray on its own is $10,000, depending on the model, like $7,000 if you're a tight-ass dual-cab purchaser who wants a galvanised tray. But matte black, dude, if you're going to be fighting zombies off-road, come on. Still great value, $10,000 for the tray. $10,000. More than 100 accessories are listed in total, dude. It's amazing. Download the list. It's hours of fun reading, you know. And it won't cure your insomnia if you want to buy a Ranger Super Duty. You'll be opening up Excel and making a spreadsheet of all the ones you want, which will be more than 100. 100 accessories. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more than enough to crush a standards-compliant D-cup stripper, Ming Mole, whatever. AS, whatever it is, 6901 is the Australian standard for persons who disrobe for commercial gain and entertainment. If the weight of $100 bills in the undergarments of a standards-compliant D-cup stripper like that would be enough to cause at least serious injury, I'd suggest, should you tick every box sort of thing. D-cup stripper's the one to go by. 62.5 kilos is the weight of a D-cup stripper. That's important because it's 16 per tonne. It makes the mental arithmetic really easy. You know, weight of a Hilux, therefore, is approximately 32 strippers. Like, there you go. Gas struts for the bonnet, for example, right? If you've got limp wrists and your hair in a bun, dude, the gas struts for the bonnet are just $99. And let's face it, hair in a bun and limp wrists, skinny jeans, whatever, That's a breach of the Super Duty Code of Conduct. But if you breach that code, they've got you covered. The gas struts, $99. A tow bar seems to be standard because the length of the vehicle is specified two ways, with tongue and without. And in my experience, with tongue is usually extra. You want the tongue? That's extra. The tongue is specified as standard, therefore, with that vehicle, implying that the tow bar is standard. But you have to buy a tow ball, the cheap pricks, right? $63 it's going to cost you for the 50mm tow ball with your hair in a bun kind of thing, skinny jeans, whatever. $133 for the 70mm tow ball that allows you to tow 4.5 ton and makes you look like the Marlboro Man humping frickin' Desi Freeman and Jossie Rambo after the Mardi Gras sort of thing. A power roll-top tonneau is $4,369 for the as-yet undiscussed with tub pickup version of the Ranger Super Duty. They've only talked about the with tray version so far, so there must be something bad about the with tub that they're withholding till the last minute. But anyway, $4,369 if you want a powered roll-top tonneau for that vehicle, which is cheaper, perversely, than the equivalent product from the factory for a Kia Tasman. So value is, I suppose, relative. The ARB Summit bar, if you don't want it in a pack and you just want it on its own, is $5,661, dude. Not 5,660. 5,661. We couldn't round it down because, money. The rock slide is at $2,095. Wheel nut indicators, $150. They make you look like you know what the fuck you're doing, don't they? A dual battery system brackets battery prep pack is $1,850, and I suppose that means everything that goes in a dual battery system except the actual dual battery kind of thing. The bottom line, okay, it's an extensive list, and I urge you to look at it, right? I've never seen a list of accessories this long with any vehicle, and I've been doing this a long time, okay? Ranger Super Duty, the bottom line, is kind of the ultimate as yet untested Ranger, isn't it? It's from a manufacturer that's not quite as shit at reliability and support as Stellantis. So there's that. Got to put it in perspective if you're salivating and dry humping the concept. You got to play devil's advocate, and maybe that's my job, I don't know. Reliability is going to be somewhat optional on the balance of probability, therefore, I'd suggest. It is superb value at about $90,000. Like drive away price for the dual cab without a tray, bare bones Super Duty is $89,990, I think. And that's pretty good value when you think about all of the engineering and all of the upgraded capabilities that have gone into it. And I suppose that's why it's actually going to cost you about $135,000 by the time you make it your own, By the time you get your Ranger Super Duty to be the way you want the Goldilocks Ranger Super Duty for you, it's going to be $135,000. Groaning under its own weight, perhaps, of all of the boxes that you've tipped, and Ming Mole banking her commission in a full-on builder's barrow. Detuned engine up front, the mighty porter hobble full of several days' worth of commingled his and hers effluent between Kununurra and Timber Creek or places of that ilk, through endless busted-ass cattle scrub, living the friggin' dream. $89,000, $90,000, let's call it, plus. There's plus signs over the horizon, just where you want to be, dude. So, have I convinced you? Where do I sign? More when it transpires, but I'm so torn. I want to love it, dude, I do, and part of me, like 80% of me, loves it and wants one, and the other 20% is fully engaged with reality and says, Let's at least wait until nearly the end of 2026 and see how it's faring.